Hey everybody, this is Ruster Metro Game Core. You know, this channel is mostly focused on hardware and software related to gaming, but I rarely talk about the games themselves and the joy they can bring. So I want to change that up going into the future, and I want to start with Super Mario Bros. Wonder. This one just came out, and I've been loving it. You've probably seen some really great reviews about it. I'm not going to go too far into the game itself. I don't want to give any sort of spoilers, but I do want to talk about why I love it so much. And one of the things that's really interesting about it is that it actually made me fall in love with a controller that I've had for quite some time. So this video is still kind of going to be about hardware. We're going to talk about that controller and basically all the great things about it that I discovered by playing that game. And so it's going to kind of be a two-parter right here. Anyway, I'm going to talk about both the game and this controller, and I think you might learn a couple of new things along the way. Either way, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, to start, let's pretend that you've been living under a rock and you've never heard of this game. So Super Mario Bros. Wonder is a game for the Nintendo Switch and was just released. And what makes this game special is that it is a new 2D platformer. It's been a while since we've seen a completely new design. And as a child of the 80s and 90s, you can imagine I was super excited for this game. In fact, I kind of mulled over how I was actually going to play it. I knew right off the bat that I didn't want to play it on my OLED Nintendo Switch. As much as I love this device, it is very rare that I actually want to play it in handheld mode. And there's a couple reasons for that. The first probably is the fact that we don't have a true D-pad here. We just have these 4 face buttons on the left side. And I've always found that to be less than ideal when playing a platforming game. In addition, I've never been a huge fan of the very flat Nintendo Switch ergonomics. Now, the second idea I had was trying it out on the Nintendo Switch Lite. At the very least, this one has a true D-pad, which is going to make it a little bit better for platforming games. And the controls on this are also a lot softer, so the D-pad is lighter to the touch, same thing with the face buttons. However, when it comes to playing 2D platformers, this is still a little bit less than ideal. The first is the design of the Switch Lite itself. It is not a D-pad-centric device. Instead, the D-pad is below the analog stick, and not only that, it's not pushed in towards the center either. This means that over time it might make your thumb feel a little bit uncomfortable. In addition, on the right side of the Switch Lite, we have that right analog stick, and it's pretty prominent on the device. And it's not a huge deal breaker for most games, but for face button centric games, especially like Super Mario Wonder, where you're holding onto a run button then pressing the jump button, your thumb will also have to make a bridge over that right analog stick, and it's also less than ideal. So really, when it comes down to it, I don't think that Nintendo Switch hardware is the ideal way to play this specific game. Now, of course, the next thing I turned to was emulation. I tried it out on a bunch of different devices. In particular, I wanted to try something with a larger screen, so I started with the Neo-Kun, and the game works great here both in Ryujinx or the Yuzu emulators, and I also appreciate the precise feeling of this D-pad. So this is definitely one way to go about it, and it wasn't a bad experience at all. I also tried it out on the Steam Deck with the Yuzu emulator, and this was also a pretty nice experience. When you start playing a new level, it will have a little bit of stuttering as shaders are compiling, but the more you play it, the better it'll get. However, for both of these devices, I found that having those ergonomic grips were not ideal for playing platforming games. I think when you're playing more modern games, you know, when you have the analog sticks and triggers in play, then yeah, that might make more sense, but for a platformer, I kind of want something a little bit more flat and classic feeling. So I went back to the drawing board and decided to try a better way of playing it directly onto the Switch with other controllers. At first, I tried putting my Joy-Cons directly in that little container thing that comes with the Nintendo Switch. This worked okay, but again, I just don't really like this D-pad. I'd rather have something a little bit more true. I also wanted to try out the Stadia controller. I really like the D-pad on this one, but unfortunately, even with the Bluetooth update, it will not connect to a Switch unless you have a third-party dongle. So from there, I went into other third-party controllers that have direct Switch connections. I started with the 8BitDo Ultimate controller. This one's a little bit on the expensive side, but all the same, it does have a nice D-pad and it works pretty well. However, much like with the Neo-Kun and the Steam Deck, I felt like that more modern design just didn't really fit perfectly with this game. Next, I tried the 8BitDo microcontroller. I wanted something a little bit smaller, but this is kind of ridiculous. I reviewed this last month, but when it comes down to it, I consider this to be an emergency controller if there is such a thing. So when it comes to finding the ideal way to play Super Mario Bros. Wonder, I don't think this is a good fit either. Next, I tried the SN30 Pro from 8BitDo as well, and this one is modeled after the original Super Nintendo controller. And this one definitely gave me some Super Mario World vibes and was a really great fit. In fact, at first I thought, okay, this one is the perfect controller because it has that classic feel to it. And honestly, that's very true. I think that if you have the SN30 Pro and you want to play this game, it's going to be an excellent fit. However, I did have another idea in the back of my mind, and that was to try out the 8BitDo Lite. I bought this controller about a month ago after getting a bunch of recommendations from others when making my 8BitDo micro video. And the way that I was sold on it was that people said that it felt like a perfect platforming controller. It's not too big, it's not too small, and they don't have any analog sticks to get in your way. And sure enough, yes, this is the perfect fit for what I was looking for with this game. Number one, it's super thin. You can throw this in a pocket, take it around with you anywhere, and that's pretty awesome. I also love the fact that we don't have stacked trigger buttons because that's something you rarely actually need in many of these platforming games. Not only that, all of the buttons have a very low profile to them as well. It makes the whole thing feel very flat and just really easy to take around. Now, in addition to the overall design, the buttons themselves are really optimized for platforming games too. The D-pad has a cross-style design, but it also has dome switch connections. This means they have a very light travel to them, but are clicky and precise. And the clickiness here is soft and quiet. And the reason why I think it works so well with platformers is that it has a bias towards the cardinal directions. So you can always press down, up, down, left, and right without getting a diagonal if you don't want it. At the same time, it is very precise, which means that if you want to press a diagonal, you can. Now, in addition to the D-pad, the face buttons are also ideal. These are also dome switch connections, have the exact same amount of travel and resistance as the D-pad. And it's kind of hard to describe the feel of these face buttons, but they're basically identical to what you would find on a Nintendo Switch Joy-Con. So they have that nice soft clickiness to them, but are also very precise. Now, this controller will work on both the Nintendo Switch as well as PC. There's a little toggle up top that'll switch between Nintendo Switch and X input, so you can use it in a variety of different use cases. And finally, the third component that makes this controller so good is the size and weight and shape. Even though it is a little bit flat and squarish, it's rounded in all the right parts, and there's still plenty of room for your hands on the back, and so I've not found this to be fatiguing at all. For me personally, I grew up with an NES controller, and so having something a little bit squarish is not a bad thing for me as long as it's comfortable to hold, and this is definitely that. Not only that, it's a very lightweight controller. It's only 82 grams altogether. And really the only functionalities it's actually missing compared to other controllers is rumble and gyro. And it makes sense too because this is only a $25 controller, so they had to cut some corners somewhere. By the way, there are two different color options available. There's both blue and yellow. Personally, I like the yellow one better. Now, gyro does come into play with Super Mario Bros. Wonder. If you shake your Joy-Cons, it'll actually make a spin move. However, the right shoulder button will do the exact same thing. They probably put that in there for the Nintendo Switch Lite, but it also works in a favor when it comes to this controller. So really, when it comes to this game, there is no loss in functionality at all. Anyway, I love being thorough in my review, so let's go over the rest of the controller so you know what you're getting into. Now on the bottom right, we have our 8-bit logo button. This is effectively going to be your power button, and you can tell whether or not it's connected and which player you are by the LED indicators on the bottom. On the bottom left, we have our star button. This is a turbo button, but when only using it in PC mode. To set this up, you'll press the face button, then the star button, and then from then on, it'll be a turbo. Now below the D-pad, we have another D-pad on the left, but then also another D-pad on the right. The right D-pad is basically your right analog stick function, and same thing with the one on the left, although you can switch that up to be either a D-pad or a left analog stick. And to swap between those modes, all you have to do is hold onto the select button and then press left on whatever it is you want to toggle. Honestly, I've just never used these D-pads down below, but it is nice to have that input in case you need it with a specific game. And of course, the best thing about them is that they are super low profile, so they don't get in your way at all. So when I am playing it in the traditional D-pad style, it doesn't even cross my mind that these things even exist. Anyway, as you can tell, I'm pretty darn excited about this controller and the possibilities that it brings to platforming games. For me, it's kind of the ultimate pick up and play controller when it comes to playing platforming games. And for me, I found that this game has been a perfect fit for the controller and my own workflow. As you can imagine, I spend a lot of time kind of stuck to my desk when I'm doing editing and working on a video, and every once in a while I do need a break. Usually I'll just get up and walk around, but over the past few days I've been spending a lot of time playing Super Mario Bros. Wonder on my Mac. I did a whole video about how emulation and gaming on a Mac is actually pretty great right now, and the Ryujinx emulator runs this game perfectly. I use an M1 MacBook Pro for all my work stuff, and it's still a really great processor when it comes to emulation. In fact, I can play Super Mario Bros. Wonder at a 2x upscale. And sometimes I play it in like a small little window just to not distract me too much, but other times I like to blow it up in a full screen. And the nice thing is after I've finished a game, I can just save it and close it out and then resume it later on. Now, I don't want to do a full review of this game, but I do want to talk briefly about why it's been resonating with me so much. And part of that has to do with the Mario games that I really treasure just from my childhood. And by far, my #1 game of all time is Super Mario Bros. 2. I know it's kind of an unconventional choice, but when this game first came out, man, it was really mind-blowing for my 8-year-old mind. And what I really loved about Super Mario Bros. 2 is that we had 4 different characters to choose from, and each of them felt a little bit different when you played the game. Not only that, there was a ton of variety in the levels, and they would just throw these random mechanics at you left and right. And all of those components really sparked my curiosity when it came to pushing the boundaries of what you could do in a video game. Now, we did get Mario 3 later on, and that was also a very excellent game, but kind of in a different style. And my family never had a Super Nintendo, we were a Sega Genesis household, and so because of that, I never really got far in Mario World 1 or 2. And of course, things got crazy after that with Mario 64 and the other 3D-based games, although I did love some of those 2D platformers that came later, like New Super Mario Bros. On the Nintendo DS. And so while many people are saying that Super Mario Bros. Wonder is kind of the best game that's come out since Yoshi's Island, I disagree. I think it's the best game to come out since Super Mario Bros. 2. And that's because a lot of the wonder I felt with that original Mario 2 is right here as well. And there's a couple deliberate design things that really make a connection for me. Number one is there are no time limits on any of these levels. It's a lot like Super Mario Bros. 2 in that regard. And that small little design change has made the game feel a lot more exploratory in the fact that I don't mind backtracking and trying to find other secrets. So in that regard, I've been really savoring the Super Mario Bros. Wonder experience in the fact that I just don't feel rushed. I have all the time in the world to actually get through each of these levels. The other thing that really sparks my curiosity with this game is the fact that we have multiple characters to choose from, and the power-ups that you use will also give you a different look and feel as well. So in my mind, the fact that you have multiple characters and power-ups also goes back to that feeling of having different characters to choose from in Super Mario Bros. 2. Now, there's plenty of other things I could gush about with this game. You know, the animations are beautiful, the soundtrack is awesome, the colors are really vibrant. There's just so many things to love about it, but those two things in particular have really kind of connected with me when it comes to playing a platforming game. So if you are looking for an endorsement of this game from a huge Mario fan, then yes, I think Super Mario Bros. Wonder is pretty awesome. And of course, the game is even more awesome when you use that 8-bit Lite controller. I found that this has been a perfect mix for my own gameplay style. Now, to be fair, I've been mostly playing it on my Mac just because it's so readily accessible and I like having that controller to grab and play with. But I think using that controller on a Nintendo Switch, either in handheld or docked mode, is also a really great time. Anyway, that's really about it for this video. I wanted to keep it a little bit short and sweet and just kind of talk about why I think this game is so great and how this controller has really enhanced that experience. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. Have you picked up this game and are you enjoying it? And also, do you think that that additional $25 price point to enhance the control experience is going to be worth it as well? As always, thank you for watching and be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.